DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Happy Waitangi Day, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the day off. And if you want a rugby fix, here it is. We've got Six Nations round 2 coming up this weekend. By the time you've watched this, Hurricanes and Crusaders probably would have played their match in Invercargill. We've got Preseason Super Rugby to talk about. And some innovations as well in this year's competition, which you are going to love, which Tony Johnson from Sky Sport is going to outline for us. He joins us every week here on the podcast. Real pleasure. Welcome back, Tony.
Kia ora, Marty.
Let's talk to start with Six Nations, because we got 3 fixtures this weekend, all of them carrying a lot of significance for different reasons. 2 on Sunday morning for you, which I'm loving this because I'm recording the early games and watching them over breakfast like most of us do. Then there's one on Monday, and we'll tackle them in order. Italy versus Wales. Most of us think this is a wooden spoon match. If the Welsh lose, that's 14 in a row. And where do they go if they lose that game?
Yeah, I think you're not brave saying it's the wooden spoon match. I mean, Italy have tended to struggle a lot, but they're a better team now. They represent a real threat to a Wales team that, to me, is probably at its lowest ebb. I can't imagine there's been a time in the past where they've lost 14 games in a row.
Not stat
and they were absolutely flogged by France. Yeah. I mean, it's a very good France team, but to me it's sad to see Wales in the state. Because,
I agree, Tony.
Well, for a long time, and remember that there was only a handful of games scattered over 50 or 60 years, but for a long time they'd actually beaten the All Blacks more than the All Blacks had beaten them. It was always the focal point of a northern tour was the test match against Wales.
Well, let's go back to 78 and the Grand Slam tour. That was always considered the toughest match, wasn't it? That 77 Lions team, and I remember this because I was of the age, was stacked with Welsh players.
Well, you'd argue that rugby wouldn't have been the same were it not for the first one back in 1905. Did Bob Dean score? Did he not score?
You go.
It just created this drama that, something like 19 years later, the next All Black team went back and they were fired by the memory of that to beat them. So that's the sort of history that there is. And of course, like us, rugby is their national game.
That's right.
It's a small, very proud principality, and we've a bit in common with them. They take so much pride out of the feats of their rugby team. And I remember the first test match I ever saw. My dad took me to see the Lions, and they were based around the brilliance of Gareth Edwards, Barry John, Mervyn Davis, Gerald Davis, JPR Williams. Yeah. And you go through the years, Phil Bennett, Jonathan Davies have always produced great players.
Yeah.
But at the moment, it just seems
it's
like
dire for them, isn't it?
It is. It's really hard to get 2 Welsh people to agree on what the problem is. Some will blame the coach. I don't think it's Warren Gatlin's fault at all. I think he took that job out of a sense of devotion and loyalty. Good on him for doing that, but he knew what he was biting off there.
They got a rebuilding. I liken it to Man United. We were in a 30-year run. It just seems to me that they need another 5 to 10 years for these young players to come good, but they can't wait that long. That's the problem, isn't it?
And are they there? Because one of the other things you'll hear arguments saying, we were better when it was Neath against Cardiff or Swansea, and now it's the Ospreys, against the Dragons, against the Blues. They kind of took the Super Rugby model and went a bit more regional, and some people still haven't really accepted that. I don't think that's the problem. I actually thought that was the solution. But I've also heard people say that maybe these days they're not a particularly healthy nation. People talk about. I saw it the last time I was there. Someone talking about the diet that people are on. That kids aren't as active as they used to be, and maybe it's a social problem as well. Whatever it is, Marty, it's not pretty to watch, and I feel a bit sad about it.
Okay, but let's look at Italy and actually give them some props, because they came back well against Scotland to be 19-all, and then Scotland scored a couple of tries and actually ran away with that game in the end. But then they won 2 last year, and they drew with France and should have beaten France, but for that last penalty miss or whatever it was. So we've got a lot of empathy for Wales. But let's look at Italy. I mean, they're approaching this game like they should be winning this game.
Yeah, and it's been so good to see that shift in mentality. I can remember going back, and I can't remember, mid 2000s and something or other, when they played at Milan and everyone turned up, Italian football stars, fashion models and what have you, to watch the All Blacks against Italy. And Italy, Nick Mallett was the coach, guy I greatly admire, but his whole thing was, let's keep the score down. And that's what Italy used to be about. they loved being at the top table of the Six Nations, but they were like the guest that you invited to a potluck dinner that turned up in a very, very nice suit, but not even a bottle of wine. They're different now.
Great analogy, yeah.
Yeah, they're different now.
Yeah.
There's a belief there that they didn't used to have. And so I would say on form, in Rome at the Olympic Stadium, that they'll be a good chance to beat Wales.
England hosting France. Did you see enough from England last week? And Justin Marshall talking to us at the beginning of the week reckoned that he did. I don't know whether they're going to beat France, but certainly at home at Twickenham, do you give them a chance?
Yeah, if they could play like they played in the first half an hour, even the first footy for the whole game, then maybe they're a shot at it. But the All Blacks had this problem last year, sustaining their effort through the 80 minutes. And that's what happened to England. They just lost their way in the second half against an Ireland team that we'd all thought maybe they've climbed their peak. They lost the quarterfinal of the Rugby World Cup again and maybe on a bit of a slide.
But not so. When you saw that 22 points they scored unanswered, they looked mighty, I thought.
Yeah, they did. But at the same time, all the things that England were doing well in the first half, they stopped doing them. Marcus Smith, who I know I've spoken to Nick Evans about him, raves about him, just says he's just such a wonderful, creative player. But to me, he got lost. Wherever the ball was, he didn't seem to be. Then they put him back to fullback. I see this week they are going to start him at fullback, and Finn Smith is coming in at 10. That just seems to be the whole focal point about the England team at the moment. I'm not sure that that's all that they've got. There are other things that they need to deal with. Otherwise, I think the knives are going to start sharpening. Well, already there are grumblings about Borthwick.
Yeah.
But if they lose again, and I mean, this French team with the most influential player in the world at the moment, that's a hell of a tall order. It's going to take an extraordinary effort. But I thought England, like Justin said, I thought England in the first 20 or so minutes looked really good. But as we know, it's an 80-minute game.
And then, 4 a.m. Monday, and if you want to watch this over breakfast before you go to work, Scotland-Ireland. And again, because it's at Murrayfield, it changes the dynamic. Of course, if this was Ireland-Scotland at home in Dublin, I'd be just ticking Ireland on this. But again, I give Scotland a chance.
I love Murrayfield.
Yeah,
Going to a game there, it's always cold, and the pitch is always probably a little bit damp or whatever. But there's an atmosphere there it's unique. It's a brilliant atmosphere, and that makes it such a great place to go to see a game of rugby. And this one will be good, a sort of Celtic clash.
Yeah, of course.
Ireland, as I say, just when you thought maybe they've come to the end of their run, just reminded us of the quality that still exists in this team. The way they
got game breakers, they got match winners, haven't they?
Yeah.
Look at Arkey, for example. I mean, what a beast he was in that game. And Jamison, I mean, he was brilliant as well.
Well, yeah, and I suppose Kiwis, you look at the influence of the New Zealand players. James Lowe, I thought, had an extraordinary game. He can be a bit of a roller coaster, James Lowe, but I thought he was fabulous in this game. Gibson Park. I mean, it's been the making of him going to Ireland, because we see things from him that you didn't see when he was playing here in New Zealand, and they deserve credit, and he deserves a lot of credit for uncorking that himself. So, but there are others. I still don't think they've got the answer at 10. I don't think they're still scratching around a little bit.
They are. Same as England, yeah.
Well, and it's when you've had a guy who's dominated that jersey for such a long time, Johnny Sexton, such a huge personality in the team. Obviously, it's going to be hard. But look, I'd back Ireland to win this one. I think much as, the Scottish and me would quite like to see the Murrayfield crowd go home
Oh, yeah, it's
happy.
Patrick Devlin you're talking to, mate. So, yeah. Let's look at the pre-season. And we can't really talk too much about this because I want to get on to the innovations that are coming in Super Rugby. Again, commentating these games must be a nightmare, Tony.
Well, when you've got 37 players in each squad.
And they're coming off every 30 seconds as well, aren't they?
Yeah, that makes it hard. I mean, you start off and you've got 15 guys in the field, you know them all, and then suddenly you get about 20 minutes into the second half, and number 35 comes on. Yeah, I'm quite pleased. I'm not actually doing any pre-season games this year. So what do they tell us? Well, it's really about making sure everyone's getting a run, trying out a few combinations. I don't think the results amount to much
no one
at
remembers
all.
them, mate, no, so.
What they are great for is taking crowds to places like Methven, or we've seen them in Motueka in the
Kirwee
past.
last week.
Kirwee,
yeah.
that is brilliant. I love that. and long may that continue, because it is a way of connecting, and you hear that a lot now. You're about connecting with the fans, fan engagement. What better way to do it than go to places like that? I suppose the big concern, really, what I'm always looking for out of these pre-season games is who's left standing at the end of them.
Yeah.
And so already this season, we're hearing Wallace Satiti is probably not going to come back until the final weeks of Super Rugby if everything goes according to plan. Hearing that Sam Darry could be out.
Sam Darry?
Deep into the season for the Blues. He's got a shoulder problem. There's been no official announcement on that, but I'm here. It's not a 2 or 3 week injury for sure. They may have to do with that. Those sorts of things. The Hurricanes have got issues because already they've lost the number 10 for the season.
Down to 2,
yeah. And so that's a bit of a worry about these games, but you have to have them.
Well, you can't go into a Super Rugby without them, obviously. Now, the innovations that you're talking about, and just before we started chatting, there's one with the referees, which I just absolutely love, mate.
Oh, yeah. So we talk about fan engagement, and you hear it from the powers that be, the marketing people and what have you. But here's, I think, something that is going to enhance it greatly. They're looking at, in key moments in the game, not all the game, but when there's a big decision coming up, you'll see the referee on the screen and you'll hear what he's saying, which is great because,
Brilliant.
You and I, we're both fans of American football.
Yeah, love it.
And you know that he strides towards the camera.
The best thing, they explain the decision, they're very clear about it, they say automatic first down, you know what it is. It's frustrating being at a ground watching rugby where you just don't know.
Yeah, and no one questions it in American football. It's sort of delivered with such authority that, okay, that's the call.
Even if they get it wrong, they get it right because of the way they deliver it.
Yeah. So we haven't quite got to the little switch on the hip box, but we are going to see that.
Is this a trial basis?
For us it is, but in New Zealand, but it'll run for the duration.
Okay, hang on. Just make a note. So the Northern Hemisphere will pick this up in about 6 months, will they? Or is it...
Who knows? There are other things that they'll be looking at. Just in terms of the fan engagement, I know they've got fantasy football. We're still waiting for a start date for that.
I think tomorrow you're allowed to register for Fantasy Super Rugby.
Yeah.
Look, everyone that plays fantasy sports, I admire it. Good on you for jumping in. I watch so much sport. I don't have time. I watch live sport. I don't have time for it in my life.
Yeah, but it's a massive thing.
It is
in sports like, say, American football or baseball.
Premier League.
I mean, God, we even had a situation in a baseball game a couple of years ago where two players, Tommy Pham from the Cincinnati Reds and another guy, I think he might have been from the Dodgers, actually got into a fight over something that had been done on fantasy football. That's how big it is.
Yeah, so look, this is, again, the fan engagement to engage with the younger generations. More power to it. I hope the hell it succeeds. It's just that I can't do it, mate.
Yeah, but we're perhaps...
I have enough trouble following my crap team anyway without fantasising about it.
Yeah, maybe we're the lost generation. We are. But for the young ones, absolutely. And not so young ones. I mean, I know a lot of our producers at work, they're all in these fantasy leagues. You've got a decent-sized budget to pick your players. The really good thing is, you can upgrade your team. They're using all the stats, genuine match stats that are being used, in terms of awarding points to the players. So just hopefully it will be up and running in time for the start of the season or very soon after. I think they had 1 or 2 problems. But again, it's just something that, how do you grab that younger generation? It's a huge challenge, not just for rugby, but for all sports. Yeah. And there's also going to be a Super Rugby Pacific player of the tournament. And this is an interesting one because, when I saw this, I thought, well, don't we have that in the Rugby Awards? But this is right throughout the whole competition. So it applies to, obviously, the Fijian Drua, the Australian teams, Moana Pacifica, the New Zealand teams. And the coaches and captains of each team have to award points on a 3, 2 and 1 basis to the best players from the opposition. That's how it's going to be.
That's a nice little twist.
That's how it's going to be scored.
Twist.
Yeah,
right. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, good luck with that. You imagine coming off, you've just been beaten by 30 points. Yeah. What do you mean I have to pick 3 of their players?
Exactly. Right.
But I mean, it's all worthy. And as I say, that those are 3 things that they're doing to try and raise the levels of fan engagement. The numbers were good last year. They got better in terms of the crowd as the season wore on.
Yeah, it was a great comp last year, and anyone who says it wasn't, you weren't watching it, 'cause it was a great comp. And finally, just before, we're 2 Fridays away. So do you have Valentine's Day plans, or are your plans, you're in front of the screen, you've got the microphone?
No, we don't do Valentine's Day.
Well, see, Valentine's Day is Super Rugby Day to me this year.
Every day's Valentine's Day in our house, Martin. 22 years of wedded bliss. Don't need it. Yeah.
Here's the truth.
DSPN.